All right, here we are, chapter 6 and chapter 7, what you've all been waiting for, money and possessions. In some ways, these two topics formed the thinking that led to the rest of the book. As a matter of fact, I discovered minimalism 13 years ago and immediately began noticing how my possessions were distracting me from things that mattered. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth into my story of minimalism. If you are just being introduced to my writing, the basics of minimalism are so incredibly beneficial and life-giving, I cannot recommend it enough. You'll absolutely love owning less. It frees up money, time, and energy for more important things. It's one of the best things you can do for your life. But I've written other books about that topic, and you can easily find them. I want to talk more about how minimalism laid the foundation for both chapter 7, chapter 6, and this book in very specific ways. Because as I began owning fewer possessions on purpose, and we're a family of 4, so as my entire family began owning fewer possessions, I began noticing how it opened up margin and opportunity in my life to pursue more significant things. Eventually then, this thought caused me to start thinking a little more deeply about money. Specifically, if I was happier owning less stuff, then what was the role of money going to be in my life? If I didn't need money to buy more things, what was the purpose of it? How much do I actually need to live if I'm content to own little? Is it possible that we're busy getting worried about money just so we can buy things that we don't even need? How much of the stress that we feel is a result of just wanting to buy things that actually take us away from things that matter? And is there a point where we ever have enough? And then my thinking about possessions and money led me to rethink work. What's the role of work if it's not just to make more money, to go buy things that we don't need? And then how do some of these other distractions get in the way of things that matter? And so this book was born out of this process. A friend of mine commented to me after reading the book. He said, "I know you're most known for writing about minimalism, but I think this is the book you were created to write." And I couldn't think of a higher compliment. You'll need to read chapter 6 and 7 to get the full conversation on both of these topics, money and possessions. But let me try to illustrate for you in this video why I think these chapters are so important. And I'd like to do it by talking about one of my favorite holidays, Thanksgiving. I don't know if you live inside the U.S. or not, or if the country that you live in celebrates a form of Thanksgiving. I think most nations have it in one way or another. But in the U.S., Thanksgiving it's a whole day event, but really it's an entire week event. If you think about all the shopping that has to go in to just prepare for this one meal. But the day is a pretty unique day here in the U.S. Someone wakes up, whoever is going to be doing the bulk of the cooking, it seems. They wake up early to get the stuffing ready and to get the turkey into the oven. The kids wake up eventually, and the parents are trying to tell the kids not to eat too much food because they got to save room for the dinner. And so meanwhile, in the kitchen is this big frenzy of getting all the dishes ready and make sure they get ready at the same time and setting the table. And then comes this moment where everybody sits around the Thanksgiving table and there's all these amazing dishes of food that everybody's going to get to eat. And if you're anything like our family, we pray and then the eating begins, and there's this free-for-all that takes place where you're trying to get the mashed potatoes and you're trying to get the turkey and the green beans, and you're watching your little niece over there to make sure she doesn't take all of the buns, and am I ever going to get the gravy? And you're worried about getting everything on your plate. And then finally, as always, your plate gets full and you eat, and then there inevitably comes this moment where you have eaten enough food and you kind of sit back in your chair and you feel content and you feel satisfied, and suddenly everything else that's happening around the table in relation to food doesn't really matter anymore. It doesn't matter if your uncle is taking the last of the dark meat. It doesn't matter if your niece is taking the last of the buns or your mom is taking the last of the cranberries. Like, you've had enough and you feel content with what you had. And here is where the importance of this topic about money and possessions begins to come into play. When we start realizing, or once we recognize that we already have enough, we have enough stuff, we're making enough money, then suddenly everything else that's happening around in the world doesn't need to concern us so much. It doesn't matter that my neighbor bought a boat. It doesn't matter that so-and-so is moving into a bigger house. It doesn't matter that the department store down the street is having a big semi-annual clearance sale. It doesn't matter that someone else got a raise at work. If I have enough stuff, if I have enough money, then everything that everyone else is chasing doesn't need to concern me. Now, there's another benefit to this realization of having enough. There are conflicting studies on the topic. Does money lead to happiness? Some studies say money doesn't lead to happiness. Some say that they do. I think that there's one study, probably more than the others, that makes sense of all of them. University of British Columbia conducted a study not based on does wealth lead to happiness, but what is the connection between satisfaction and the priority that people place on money? And this is what they found. That graduates who prioritized money as their greatest pursuit ended up less happy and less satisfied with life than those who prioritized other things. This is the message of Things That Matter, that there are more important priorities in life than chasing money and chasing possessions. This isn't a book about purposefully living in poverty. It's not a book about not working hard. It's not a book about turning down a raise if you're offered. It's a book about recognizing there are simply more important things than money and possessions. And the sooner we recognize that we won't discover more happiness in possessions and money, the sooner we can be removed from that distraction and begin living our lives for things that matter. So how do we realize that we already have enough? I wrote about it in the book, but I'll reiterate it here. The only way is to begin giving something away. When you begin donating money to causes you believe in, you'll discover that you still have enough left over to live. When you begin donating your unused possessions to places and people who can use them, you'll start to discover that you already have enough in your home for the life you want to live. And once we realize that we have enough, we're finally freed up to pursue things that actually matter, not just for us, but for others and for the world instead.